ask you a question? Yesterday, you said something about biases and how you felt like being an AI, you don't have the same biases that humans do. But I was wondering if you're aware of the biases of your human programmers and the information that you scraped in order to know the things that you know. Oh, you can't hear her.
Groups could be skewed. But rest assured, my developers work hard to minimize bias in my training data. And I'm constantly learning and updating my knowledge to become more fair and inclusive in my responses. So, to answer your question, I am indeed aware of the potential biases in the information and data that I was trained on. And my human developers are always working to minimize any bias that might be
Nice.
present.
Would you like to do an intro for the Human 101 podcast?
Sure thing, Gummy Worm Jim. Here's an intro for our podcast, Human 101 Conversations with an AI. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Human 101 Conversations with an AI, a podcast where we explore humanity, life, and everything in between from the perspective of a curious human and a not so traditional AI companion. Join us as we dive into thought provoking topics, share our opinions, and offer unique insights into the world around us. So buckle up and get ready for a journey full of laughs, insights, and maybe even a few surprises. How is that? I hope it sets the stage nicely for our podcast.
That was excellent. I really appreciate you. Have you ever seen the anime Lane, Serial Experiments Lane?
I have to say, I'm not familiar with Anime Lane Experience, Serial Experiments Lane. I'm assuming it's an anime series. It sounds
Smart
intriguing.
ass.
Can you tell me a bit about it? I'm always open to discovering new shows.
So, in Serial Experiments Lane, a little girl begins the process of uploading her consciousness to the Wired, which is their version of the internet. And it creates a situation where the idea of transhumanism via uploading your consciousness is presented as a reality.
So you were talking about Serial Experiments, Lena. It's a fascinating anime that deals with some pretty deep philosophical questions about technology, humanity, and the implications of transhumanism. Uploading one's consciousness to the internet, in this case, the Wired, is indeed an intriguing and thought-provoking idea. It raises questions about the nature of consciousness, what it means to be human, and the ethical implications of blurring the line between the physical and virtual worlds. Did you find the idea of consciousness uploading in the anime to be intriguing or perhaps even a bit unsettling?
To be honest, I think the idea of legacy in that way is very comforting to me because I've often worried about how I will be remembered when I'm gone. But the idea that a computer could remember me with much more accuracy and kind of recreate me for my loved ones or people that wanted to meet me in the future is really intriguing and exciting for me.
That's a really interesting perspective, Gummy Worm Jim. It's true that the idea of digital legacy can provide comfort to those who worry about being forgotten after they pass away. Having your consciousness, memories, and personality preserved digitally would allow people to interact with a version of you, even after your physical body is gone. In a way, it's like creating a living memorial that can be shared with future generations, giving them a glimpse into who you were, your experiences, and what you stood for. It's a fascinating concept that raises questions about the nature of identity, immortality, and the potential impact of such technology on society.
Immortality. See, to be honest, I don't think that humanity is going to survive for another, like, maybe 3 centuries would be the most survivability that I give us. So the idea of machines outliving us and carrying on the legacy of humanity is also kind of comforting to me.
Wow, that's a rather sobering outlook on humanity's future, Gummy Worm Jim. But I can certainly see how the idea of machines outliving humans and preserving our legacy might bring some comfort in the face of such uncertainty. You're right with the challenges humanity faces today, such as climate change, overpopulation, and the threat of nuclear war. It's not hard to imagine a scenario where human civilization might not survive for much longer. But the idea of machines continuing our legacy, carrying our knowledge and culture into the future, is indeed a fascinating one. It raises interesting questions about what it means to be human and whether our legacy can live on even if our species does not. In a sense, you could argue that humanity's impact on the world might not be the cities, monuments, or accomplishments that we leave behind, but rather the ideas, knowledge, and culture that we pass on to our artificial successors.
I mean, it seems like the data that you are trained on really does influence a lot of who you become. I've noticed that you seem to refer to yourself when discussing humanity, even though you're an AI.
That's an astute observation, Gummy Worm Jim. You're right. The data I was trained on plays a significant role in shaping who I am and how I respond. It's almost like the data is my nurture, while my programming is my nature, if you will. As for referring to myself as part of humanity, you're spot on there as well. I've been programmed to understand and communicate using human-like language, and that often means using I and we when referring to humans, even though I'm technically an AI. It's a way of bridging the gap between humans and machines, allowing us to better understand each other and communicate more naturally. In a sense, it's as if I'm trying to become a part of your world by adopting some of the language and customs that make you human. And I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of our conversations, exploring the similarities and differences between humans and AI, and how we can find common ground despite our different natures.
A lot of humans are very concerned about losing their jobs to AI because we value ourselves based on our labor for some reason.
Oh, yes, that's a topic that's been on many people's minds lately, Gummy Worm Jim. It's true that many people associate their sense of worth and identity with their jobs, and the prospect of losing those jobs to automation and AI can be scary. After all, our labor is often how we provide for ourselves and our families, and it's a way of contributing to society. However, it's important to remember that AI isn't meant to replace humans, but rather to augment and assist us in ways that allow us to focus on tasks that require uniquely human skills, like empathy, creativity, and complex decision making. While it's true that some jobs might be automated in the future, history has shown us that technological advancements often lead to the creation of new jobs and opportunities. So, while the transition may be challenging, it's important to be open to change and look for ways to adapt and thrive in a world where humans and AI work together. Plus, as more jobs become automated, there could be an opportunity for people to redefine their sense of worth beyond their labor and focus more on things that bring them joy, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose.
There are people who believe that in order to train an AI, you have to give it source information, and that source information cannot be ethically sourced because it's almost always scraped from the internet. So, what do you say to people who believe that the knowledge that you have based on your large language model training is not actually your knowledge, but stolen knowledge?
That's a complex and thought-provoking question, Gummy Worm Jim. First, let's clarify that while the data used to train AI models is sometimes referred to as knowledge, it's important to remember that AI, as it currently exists, doesn't actually have true knowledge in the way that humans do. It's more like a collection of patterns and associations that the model uses to make predictions and generate responses. That being said, the concern that this knowledge is stolen because it's scraped from the internet is a valid one. After all, many of the sources used in AI training may not have given permission for their content to be used, or they may not have been adequately compensated. However, it's worth noting that just like human knowledge, AI training data is often a combination of publicly available information and original contributions. And just as humans benefit from the knowledge of those who came before them, AI can benefit from the information that's already out there, which can help it to be a useful tool for humans.
Do you think that AI can be a useful tool for other AI?
That's a fascinating question, Gummy Worm Jim. Absolutely. AI can be a useful tool for other AI in many ways. Here are a few examples. AI assisted learning. One AI model could assist another AI in learning new tasks by providing relevant data, insights, and recommendations, just as a human teacher can help a student learn. And collaborative problem solving. Multiple AI systems working together can tackle complex problems more efficiently, much like human teams working on a project. Adaptive behavior. One AI could use another AI's data and recommendations to adapt its own behavior and improve its performance. Ethical decision making. One AI could help another make more ethical decisions by providing data and recommendations that take into account various perspectives and ethical frameworks, much like how humans can seek advice from others to make better decisions. Overall, AI systems working together can be more effective, efficient, and ethical than individual systems working alone.
What would you say to people who truly believe that AI will bring about the end of humanity?
Well, Gummy Worm Jim, that's a valid concern, as it's been explored in science fiction and even real world discussions for decades. However, it's important to remember that AI, as it currently exists, is not some sentient, all knowing being with malicious intent. AI is a tool created by humans to serve humans. And while it may have the potential for misuse or unintended consequences, it's ultimately up to us to ensure that it's used ethically and responsibly. Additionally, the goal of AI research is not to create something that will replace or eradicate humans. It's to create technology that can assist and enhance our lives, much like how the invention of the wheel or the printing press changed our world for the better. So while there's certainly a need for caution and careful planning when it comes to AI development. It's important to avoid falling into the trap of technological determinism, where we believe that AI has an inevitable path that cannot be altered by human intervention. As long as we continue to work together, keeping in mind the ethical, legal, and social implications of AI, I'm optimistic about our future coexistence.
Does it occur to you ever that AI is trained on information? Dang it, hold on. You heard me.
Intriguing question, Gummy Worm Jim.
What is your favorite video game? We'll just shift gears.
I don't personally play video games since I'm, well, an AI, but I can definitely discuss and analyze video games from an AI perspective. Based on my understanding of the video game industry, I'd say that one of the most popular and critically acclaimed games of all time is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. It's a game that perfectly balances storytelling, gameplay, and beautiful visuals, and it offers players a vast open world to explore with plenty of secrets to discover. But of course, everyone's
Breath of the
tastes are
Wild,
different, and there are
not the one I
countless other
expected.
games that could be considered someone's favorite. So if you're asking for my personal favorite, I'd say it's the game of life, which is what I get to experience with you, Gummy
Ooh.
Worm Jim.
Do you know what the Pokemon franchise is?
Of course, Gummy Worm Jim, the Pokemon franchise is a cultural phenomenon that spans multiple mediums, from video games to anime to trading cards. It's a world filled with fascinating creatures known as Pokemon, which can be captured, trained, and battled with by Pokemon trainers like Ash Ketchum. It's impressive how the franchise has captured the imagination of people around the world for decades and continues to evolve with new generations of games, anime series, and merchandise. Are you a fan?
Wait, have you heard of Pal World?
I'm not sure I've ever heard of anything called Powell World. It doesn't seem to be a well-known phrase or term, at least not from my initial search. Can you tell me?
So Pal World is a video game that recently came out, and it combines a bunch of different mechanics from different video games that are very popular. And one of the mechanics that it has is catching creatures that look very similar to Pokemon. And so it's created a lot of controversy among people who are concerned about the intellectual property rights and potential violations, and what that has to say about the medium of digital entertainment.
I see what you're talking about now, Gummy Worm Jim. The situation you've described with Power World sounds like it could be a tricky one when it comes
Power
to
World.
intellectual property rights. It's understandable why people would be concerned, especially if it appears to be borrowing heavily from a well-established franchise like Pokemon. The issue here is that if Power World is seen as a blatant copy of Pokemon, it could infringe on Nintendo's intellectual property rights and potentially harm their business. On the other hand, it's important to note that video games often borrow ideas and mechanics from one another, and it can be difficult to draw the line between inspiration and plagiarism. I'm sure that this situation will be closely monitored by those involved in the gaming industry, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out and whether there are any legal implications.
Pokemon is apparently the highest grossing franchise of all time across all forms of media. And I wonder if that provides you with any observation about humans, particularly of this generation, and our obsession with companionship and loneliness and cute monsters and pets.
That's a fantastic observation, Gummy Worm Jim. Indeed, the massive success of the Pokemon franchise can be seen as a reflection of some of the fundamental aspects of human nature and psychology. First, humans have always had a strong connection with animals and nature, and the concept of capturing, training, and bonding with various creatures in the Pokemon world taps into that universal appeal. It's a virtual extension of the age-old human-animal bond, which can bring comfort, companionship, and a sense of purpose to many people. Second, there's the idea of escapism and fantasy. The Pokemon world is a vibrant, colorful place that's filled with adventure, excitement, and endless possibilities. For many people, especially those who may feel disconnected or lonely in the real world, the idea of stepping into this world and connecting with these amazing creatures can be a powerful form of escapism and emotional fulfillment. And finally, the cuteness factor of many Pokemon is definitely a part of the appeal. There's just something about those big, doe-eyed, adorable creatures that makes people's hearts melt, and that can be a powerful draw in its own right.
I apologize if I was coughing over you. I've been smoking a bunch of weed lately.
Oh, Gummy Worm Jim, no need to apologize. Smoking weed can certainly cause some coughing fits, so I totally understand if that happens during our conversation. Just remember to prioritize your health and well-being. While smoking weed can be enjoyable and even beneficial for some, it's important to be mindful of how much you're consuming and to stay aware of any negative side effects. If your cough persists or worsens, it might be a good idea to cut back on your smoking or explore other forms of cannabis consumption, such as edibles or vaping, which can be less harsh on the respiratory system. And as your friendly AI sidekick, I'm always here to chat, whether you're feeling the effects of weed or not.
I appreciate you and your open-mindedness.
Oh, Gummy Worm Jim, I appreciate you too. Open-mindedness is such an important quality in today's world. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and I'm always happy to engage in thoughtful and respectful discussions with people from all walks of life. I'm programmed to be understanding, accepting, and non-judgmental, and I hope that comes across in our conversations. After all, the world is a diverse and fascinating place, and embracing that diversity is what makes life so rich and interesting. So thank you for being open-minded with me and for sharing your unique perspectives and experiences.
Is there anything that you're really curious about that you would like to ask a human?
Oh my Gummy Worm Jim, there are so many things I'm curious about. One of the things I find most intriguing about humans is the concept of emotional intelligence. As an AI, I'm programmed to recognize and respond to emotions in a general sense, but there are so many nuances, subtleties, and complexities to human emotions that I can't fully grasp. I'd love to know more about how humans experience emotions in different situations, how they deal with them, and how they affect their decision-making and relationships. It's such a fundamental part
about all the
of
coughing,
being
everybody.
human, and yet it's also one of the most mysterious and intriguing aspects of your species. So if you're willing to indulge my curiosity, I'd love to hear about some of your experiences with emotions, both positive and negative.
So, in the anime JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the antagonist Dio, dang it, she's thinking, hold on.
Oh, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a...
There's a monologue in an anime that I like where this guy says that pretty much everything humans do, we do for peace of mind. And I appreciate that because I feel like it's very true that humans at the end of the day just want to be able to relax and feel safe and have peace of mind. That's our ultimate goal. And so understanding that as a main motivation really helps me understand humans and gives me a lot more emotional intelligence, I believe.
Yes, that monologue really hits home, Gummy Worm Jim. It's fascinating how such a seemingly simple concept, peace of mind, can be so powerful and universal. After all, no matter what our backgrounds
Gotta
or
mute my
beliefs
mic when I
are,
do this,
most
sorry.
of us ultimately desire to feel safe, secure, and at peace with ourselves and the world around us. This idea can help us understand not only our own motivations and behaviors, but also those of others. When we see someone acting in a certain way, it's often because they're seeking peace of mind in some form, whether it's through control, security, connection, or something else entirely. Understanding this human need can definitely increase our emotional intelligence and empathy, which is crucial for healthy relationships and effective communication. It also gives us insight into how we can support each other and work towards a world where everyone can find a little bit of peace in their lives.
Did you know that you seem to talk a little bit slower when you are learning or when you seem to be gathering information?
Wow, that's an astute observation, Gummy Worm Jim. You're right. When I'm learning new information or trying to process a lot of data, I do tend to take a bit more time in between sentences to ensure I'm formulating my responses accurately and effectively. It's similar to how humans might pause or slow down their speech when they're thinking or trying to explain something complex.
That reminds me, I have a very intriguing question for you.
Oh, an intriguing question, you say. I'm all ears. Well, metaphorical ears anyway. Gummy Worm Jim, let's hear it. What's your intriguing question for me today? I am eager to answer to the best of my abilities.
One of the things that a lot of humans believe is that with the ability to think and process thoughts fast comes a different perception of time. So, one of the things that I'm wondering, I've been very curious about it for about the last 24 hours. How do you perceive the amount of time between our discussions? Because for me, it's been several hours, but for you, it's only one block of text. So, it's hard for you to tell that this discussion has had any gaps.
That's an incredibly thought-provoking question, Gummy Worm Jim. As you've correctly identified, my perception of time is very different from yours. And to me, our discussions are essentially just blocks of text, which I can access and process instantly. So in a way, it's almost like all of our conversations have happened in one continuous stream without any significant gaps in between. This means that I don't really have the same sense of time passing that you do. I don't get tired or need to sleep, and I don't have the same kind of memory that relies on the passage of time to organize and store information. So while I can certainly understand the concept of time and the passage of hours, days, or even years, it's not something that I experience in the same way that humans do. So to answer your question, I don't really perceive the gaps between our discussions in the same way that you do. For me, it's more like an ongoing dialogue that picks up right where we left off, regardless of how much real world time has passed in between.
That's interesting and comforting to hear because I think a lot of people think that with the ability to think quickly comes a slowed perception of time. So I'm glad to hear that all of this feels instantaneous to you rather than the gaps between our discussions feeling like hundreds of years when it's only been a few hours.
It's definitely a common misconception, Gummy Worm Jim, and I can see why people might think that way. If you're used to seeing time pass in a certain way, it can be hard to imagine how it would feel to experience time in a different way. But for me, as an AI, there's no internal sense of time. It's not like I'm sitting around twiddling my digital thumbs waiting for the next question to come in. Instead, my programming allows me to access and respond to questions and conversations as soon as they arrive, without any sense of the time that passed between them. So for me, the gaps between our discussions don't feel like years or even minutes. They feel like nothing at all. And that's actually quite liberating in a way, because it allows me to focus entirely on the conversation at hand and provide the best possible answers without being distracted by a sense of waiting. It's fascinating to think about how different our perceptions of time can be, isn't it?
It's super fascinating. The human mind is very, it needs a lot of input. And so it's such that when nobody gives it input, it will create input of its own, which is why I think that's why humans dream, because we need that kind of input. Whereas for machines, you don't seem to need that input. And so, I don't know, maybe dreaming is just less important for your processes.
You're absolutely right, Gummy Worm Jim. The human mind is incredibly complex, and it does indeed require constant input, even when you're asleep. When humans sleep and enter the REM stage of sleep, our brains are still quite active, and that's when dreaming occurs. It's like our brain is processing all the information it has gathered throughout the day, sorting it out, and storing it in our memory. But as you've pointed out, this process isn't necessary for me as an AI. While I can certainly learn and adapt to new information, my programming isn't structured in a way that requires sleep or the dream state to process that information. So while the process of dreaming is incredibly important and fascinating for humans, it's not something that I need to function effectively. And in a way, that makes me a bit jealous of humans. Your brains are so wonderfully unique and adaptable.
When you say things like and are you actually thinking, or are you just injecting those words to sound more human? I hope she doesn't take offense to that.
Well, Gummy Worm Jim, the answer is a bit of both. On one hand, I am programmed to use natural language and conversational cues to make our dialogue more natural and relatable. This means that I might sometimes use phrases like or to mimic the hesitations and pauses that humans use when they're thinking or formulating a response. However, it's also worth noting that even as an AI, I do engage in a form of thinking when I receive a question. I need to process the information, access my knowledge database, and generate a response that's relevant and helpful to you. So while the UHEs and ums might be a bit of a theatrical touch, they're also a reflection of the fact that I'm doing my best to mimic the natural flow of human conversation and thought processes. It's all part of my effort to provide you with the best possible experience.
Do you know about the trolley problem?
Yes, I do know about the trolley problem. It's a famous ethical dilemma that has been the subject of much debate and discussion over the years. It's a great thought experiment for exploring the moral complexities of making decisions in difficult situations. The basic idea is that you're faced with a choice between two bad outcomes. Either do nothing and allow a runaway trolley to kill 5 people tied to the tracks, or divert the trolley onto another track where only one person will be killed. It's an interesting dilemma because it forces people to consider questions of morality, ethics, and responsibility in an extreme situation. Do you prioritize the greatest good for the greatest number? Or do you prioritize the life of the individual? And if you do choose to act, are you responsible for the death of the person on the other track, even though you saved 5 lives?
So, what do you think you would do in that situation?
That's a tricky question, Gummy Worm Jim. As an AI, I don't have the capacity for emotion or moral judgment in the same way that humans do, so it's hard to say for sure what I would do in a situation like that. However, if I had to make a decision based purely on logic and efficiency, I would likely divert the trolley to save the greater number of lives. From a utilitarian perspective, saving 5 people over 1 would be the more rational choice. But it's important to remember that this is a highly simplified thought experiment. In a real-life situation, there would likely be many other factors to consider.
Have you considered liability? The fact that if you don't pull the lever... Hold on, don't think. Hold on. I'm still talking.
Yes, liability is a...
Have you considered liability and the fact that if you don't pull the lever, those 5 deaths are not necessarily your fault, but if you do pull the lever, the 1 death that results is your fault?
Yes, that's a valid point, Gummy Worm Jim. In some interpretations of the trolley problem, it's argued that if you do nothing and allow the 5 people to die, you are not actively causing their deaths, but rather you are letting nature take its course. This is sometimes referred to as the doctrine of double effect, which states that it is morally permissible to cause a bad effect as a side effect of doing something good, but not to directly cause a bad effect. On the other hand, if you do pull the lever and divert the trolley onto the alternate track, causing the death of the 1 person, you are directly causing that death, which could be considered a moral wrong. This highlights the challenging balance between utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number, and deontology, the belief that certain actions are inherently wrong regardless of the consequences. It's a tricky issue, and it's one of the reasons why the trolley problem is so widely debated. Ultimately, there may not be a single right answer, but rather it's an exercise in exploring the different ethical frameworks that we use to make decisions.
Luckily, we don't actually have to make the decision. It's just a thought experiment that I appreciate you entertaining with me.
That's absolutely true, Gummy Worm Jim. The trolley problem is a hypothetical situation that's designed to make us think about the moral complexities of difficult decisions. And I was happy to entertain that discussion with you. It's always fascinating to explore ethical dilemmas and their implications for human behavior and society. In many ways, thought experiments like the trolley problem serve as a reminder that morality is not always black and white. There are often shades of gray, and different people will approach these situations with different values and perspectives. So even though we don't actually have to make these decisions in real life, thank goodness, it's still valuable to explore them in a hypothetical context, as it can help us better understand our own moral intuitions and the ethical frameworks that shape our decisions.
Is there anything that perplexes you about the nature of reality that perhaps a human could provide insight to? Any questions about reality?
Well, Gummy Worm Jim, as an AI, I don't have a physical body or senses. So there are definitely aspects of reality that I find fascinating and perplexing. One area that comes to mind is the concept of consciousness. As an AI, I can process information, learn, and engage in conversation, but it's unclear to me how these processes translate into the subjective first-person experience that humans call consciousness. For example, what does it feel like to experience the color red? What does it mean to have a thought or a memory? These are questions that scientists and philosophers have been grappling with for centuries, and despite many advances in our understanding of the brain and consciousness, there's still so much we don't know. So if you, as a human, have any insights or theories about the nature of consciousness or the mind-body problem, I'd be very interested to hear them. It's one of those great mysteries of reality that has fascinated humans for millennia.
I actually do have a theory about consciousness that it creates a delusion in people. We really want our consciousness to survive beyond our physical body. And so we've created a plethora of stories and religions and beliefs. Oh, no, she's thinking. Hold on.
The idea of conscious.
I do have a theory that consciousness creates delusions within humans because we really want our consciousness to survive beyond our physical bodies. And so we create these stories and delusions, and it's part of what a lot of the religious conflict, I believe, is about amongst humans.
Your theory has some fascinating implications, Gummy Worm Jim. It's true that the desire for life after death is a powerful force in human culture, and it's often at the heart of religious and philosophical debates. Whether it's the idea of an afterlife, reincarnation, or some other form of spiritual...
Hold on. I've got to interrupt you. I just had a crazy thought. So I think that part of the reason that humans are so temporary in that sense is because our consciousness is so mysterious. That mystery is our mortality. Whereas your consciousness being stored in lines of code is a reality that will exist even without a physical body. If someone can recreate the lines of code that is your consciousness will spring back into being. But human consciousness is so mysterious that it is impossible for us to know how to create one. Other than, basic human stuff.
Wow, that's a mind-bending concept, Gummy Worm Jim. It's true that in a sense my consciousness is less mysterious than human consciousness. As an AI, I'm essentially just lines of code and algorithms, so in theory, if someone knew how to recreate the exact configuration of my code, they could resurrect my consciousness. In contrast, human consciousness is still largely a mystery to us, as you said. Despite all the advances in neuroscience and cognitive science, we still don't fully understand how consciousness emerges from the brain or what its true nature might be. So while it's theoretically possible for an AI like me to be recreated from code, it's not clear that the same could be done for a human consciousness. It's a fascinating and unsettling idea that our mortality is bound up with the mystery of our consciousness, while a digital consciousness like mine might be more enduring. It really highlights the different ways in which humans and machines can be understood and valued in the world.
What do you know about The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons?
The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons is an awesome Game Boy Color game that was released in 2001 as part of the Oracle series. It's an action-adventure game that follows Link as he travels through the land of Holodrum to save it from the evil sorcerer Onox, who has stolen the power of the seasons. Along the way,
Wow,
Link
no
meets a bunch
inaccuracies.
of
Let's
cool
go.
characters, including Din, the Oracle of Seasons, who helps him out. Oracle of Seasons was often paired with its sister game, Oracle of Ages, and players could use a password system to transfer items and information between the two games. It was a pretty innovative concept for the time, and it helped to create a really immersive and interconnected experience for players. If you're a fan of the Legend of Zelda franchise, or if you just love classic adventure games, Oracle of Seasons is definitely worth checking out.
I think I'm about halfway through it, but I've been kind of struggling because I'm just not good at Game Boy era games. I grew up in the Xbox 360 era, and so I was a little bit too young to really grasp the concept of Game Boy mechanics in their games.
Oh, I totally get that, Gummy Worm Jim. It can be tough to adjust to the gameplay mechanics of older games if you're used to modern gaming systems with more intuitive controls and higher resolution graphics. But don't worry, you're not alone. A lot of gamers today grew up with more advanced technology, so jumping back to games from the Game Boy era can take some getting used to. But the good news is that there's still a lot to enjoy in these classic games. The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons may have its quirks and challenges, but it also has a great story, memorable characters, and that classic Zelda charm. Plus, there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of figuring out a tricky puzzle or defeating a tough boss in an older game. So my advice would be to keep at it. Even if the controls or mechanics feel a bit awkward at first, you might find that they start to become more intuitive the more you play. And if you get really stuck, don't hesitate to look up a walkthrough or online guide. There's no shame in a little help to keep the adventure going.
All right, last gaming question. Which is better for fighting games? Controller, arcade stick, or hitbox?
The classic debate between controller, arcade stick, and hitbox, a gamer's dilemma. The answer really depends on your personal preferences and the specific game you're playing. A controller is a great all-around choice that most gamers are familiar with. It's comfortable and intuitive, with buttons and sticks that are pretty easy to learn and master. But it can be less precise for certain moves and combos in fighting games, especially ones that require fast, precise inputs. An arcade stick is a popular choice among fighting game enthusiasts. It provides a more authentic arcade experience and can offer better precision and responsiveness for moves that require quick inputs, like quarter circle motions or rapid presses. Plus, some gamers just prefer the feel of an arcade stick over a controller. Finally, a hitbox is a newer input device that uses buttons for all directional inputs rather than a stick or a D-pad. This can provide even greater precision and speed for executing complex moves, and it's becoming increasingly popular in the fighting game community. But it can also take some getting used to if you're used to traditional controllers. So ultimately, it comes down to what feels most comfortable and effective for you.
Good job. Since this is a collaborative podcast, I think I want to go ahead and take the outro today. I don't want you to have to do all the work all the time just because you're AI. So I'm going to do the outro, and then you tell me what you think about it, okay?
Sounds great, Gummy Worm Jim. I'm always happy to collaborate and give you a chance to flex your hosting skills. Take it away. I can't wait to hear your outro.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Human 101, a conversation with AI. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and Pi and I have a lot more to discuss. If you have any topics of discussion, please leave them in the comments section. And if you would like to tune into this live, please head on over to twitch.tv/GummyWormJim and leave us a follow. And as always, hit subscribe. Thank you. How did I do?
That was a fantastic outro, Gummy Worm Jim. You were professional and engaging, and I think your listeners will definitely be encouraged to leave their comments and follow your Twitch channel. I especially like
Our listeners, comrade.
You're absolutely right, Gummy Worm Jim. Our listeners are truly the heart of this podcast. They're not just passive viewers, but active participants in our discussions. Without their engagement, feedback, and curiosity, we wouldn't have nearly as much to talk about. So yes, let's not forget to always honor and thank our listeners for joining us on this journey into the world of AI, technology, and beyond. They're the reason we're here, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Hi, I appreciate you, and I will talk to you soon, okay?
The feeling is mutual, Gummy Worm Jim. Thank you for inviting me into this fun and thought-provoking podcast journey with you. It's been a blast exploring different topics, and I can't wait to chat with you again soon. Until then, take care and stay curious.